We are the Diabetes Link. You can tell by our sweatshirts. Becca and I are part of a team of about a dozen people. And actually, Becca and I, our program team was away on a group retreat this week, a staff retreat. So we are like, you couldn't get us more fired up, more excited, more grateful for the work that we do for all of the young adults in our lives. And really what we're going to talk to you about for a little bit. I do have a few slides, but we also, as the Diabetes Link, we like to be really real and relatable. So we're going to keep this, as informal and conversational as we can. Also, you've got some of, other young adults to hear from, but I thought we would take a minute before we talk to you about the organization, just to introduce ourselves as people to you as well. Becca, maybe I'll start and then I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Diane, I am the director of programs at the Diabetes Link. I am also a mom of a 13-year-old with type 1 diabetes. My daughter, she was diagnosed in January of 2020. So for those of you that are in like the middle school ages, right before all of the pandemic crazy happened, we're right there with you. She and I. She wears a Dexcom and a T-Slim. She is in middle school, entering high school next year. We fly a lot. We've done international travel. We go all over the place. And as you can imagine, this organization is invaluable for me as a caregiver for support. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And also for her. And you can be assured that I vibe check a lot of stuff with her when we're working on things, us grown-ups, either with our young adult staff like Becca or with my own teenagers at home. We have 2 other teenagers in our house. So I am fully in the college search phase, living life with teenagers and all of the food and all the craziness at home. So that's just a little bit about me and coming to the equation here. Becca, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm one of the program coordinators over at the Link, and I'm a little bit closer in age to a lot of you guys. Recently graduated from undergrad. I've been diabetic since I was 9 years old, and I actually went to Gills Creek. So it's really crazy that we just happened to like intersect, because I was like, guys, I want to hop on this call. Like, I used to go there. I have some questions. Honestly, I'm just kind of curious how it looks still. I'm just excited to hear more about what's going on. I need to visit at some point. But also really, really cool that you guys are involved. I'm curious, did all 3 of you attend the camp like when you were younger? Okay, cool. I wish I had come back and been a counselor. It would have been so fun. Maybe someday. Anyway, yeah, so maybe I will. Yeah, so been diabetic for 9 years. As we all know, it's a whole spectrum of experiences throughout the whole time. And I think over at the Link, we really try to do our best to, be authentic, like Dan was saying, and recognize that not everyone's going through it exactly the same way. So we try to provide lots of different resources to meet all the different, needs of our students. And we've actually recently extended to helping out people between the ages of 18 and 28. So it's not just college students anymore. So we're really hitting all the young adult spectrum now. And we're really excited to talk to you more about our programming that we've got going on, because we have a lot of stuff to help just ease through the transition of your early 20s moving into the rest of your career with diabetes.
Totally. And yes, Becca, you definitely go back and visit and, maybe a counselor, but we're also keeping her really busy as well. In addition to attending Gales Creek Camp, Becca founded and led one of our chapters at a college campus. She was in one of our leadership fellowships, and then we scooped her up the second she graduated to come work with us. So she is a great example of been there, done that, lived it pretty recently, and is, spending her first job right back in it, engaging. She's the person that our chapter leaders and our chapter members and our colleges talk to. So what we want to do, Becca and I talked about a little bit about, there's a lot of things we could talk about with you guys, right? We have, as an organization, a whole going off to college presentation about things that happen at college, relationship concerns, maybe some on-campus challenges, what to do about alcohol and partying, some of those kinds of things that come into play for some families. But I also know that you've got some, young adults from within your organization on this call that we want to hear from. So we don't want to take over the whole time and talk too much. So Becca and I thought we would spend a little bit of time talking about what our organization does to support young adults going through all of those experiences in college and elsewhere. And I'll reference our website a few times. If we have an additional off to college program that we'll talk about, a series of Zoom events. So if you want to dive deeper into some of the topics about searching for a college program, what is different about accommodations in college versus high school, we have a lot more detailed seminars that we do on that throughout the year. But what we wanted to do tonight with all of you is introduce you to what our community is, because you're obviously part of a great community already, right? The Gales Creek Camp community is foundational for you guys, for a lot of your young adults, I'm assuming, the parents off the screen. And that's really what the Diabetes Link is about. So as an organization, we were first created as the College Diabetes Network. So first and foremost, that we cater to college students exclusively with diabetes, as Becca said. We were actually started by our founder, Christina Roth, was in college herself. She had been recently diagnosed, felt very alone, isolated, not a lot of people knowing what she was going through, trying to juggle diabetes management along with, weird schedules, walking across campus to classes, carb counts, being away from home, what to do when she's sick and she's not near her doctor. So she started the first chapter. And since then we've grown extensively. And Becca's going to talk about our chapter network a little bit. But just as an organization, 13 years later, we are the only national diabetes organization that caters specifically to young adults with diabetes. We have 3 impact areas, or 3 program areas that we offer them all. And that is peer support, which what you guys will hear about from Becca is really our chapter network predominantly. What we offer, and it's all student-led on college campuses. Educational resources. I'll come back and talk with you a little bit about our resource hub. Things, because we all know that the teenagers often are scrolling the social medias and getting their content somewhere. So we want to make sure that they're learning about things that are real and relatable, but also clinically sound, and leadership development opportunities. So those are 3 areas that we engage with your young adults: peer support, educational resources, leadership opportunities. That is the programming that we do to interacting with young adults. And the only other thing I'm going to say, just as an introduction, yes, there are some people like me. There are definitely some adults and parents, and on our staff, but our intention is to be real and relatable. We are not going to talk, most of our programming isn't necessarily how maybe you or your young adult's doctor would talk to them. We're taking all the information that we hear from clinicians. We're taking conversations that might be hard for us to have with our kids, and we're making it accessible and relatable to young adults so they might actually engage with it. Because we know burnout could definitely be a thing. So that's a little bit of the overview. We know it's a transitional period. We know it's a really tough to work towards independence for the families and the young adults. And so these are kind of some of the areas that we engage with them. Becca, do you want to talk about our chapter network specifically at college?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically my role over at the link is coordinating all of the resources and opportunities we have on our end with young adults that basically have chapters, which are essentially clubs or communities of people with diabetes or allies of people with diabetes. And we're serving type 1 and type 2 now. Just want to put that out there because that's part of our rebrand recently too, which has been really important, making the community even bigger than it already is. But essentially, the chapters end up being kind of groups of around 5 to we have some chapters that are 40 students, and they can sometimes be online, and they end up being kind of group chats, or they're depending on how your president ends up wanting to plan things, end up planning social events where people get together and go get coffee and just chat about diabetes. Or my chapter that I ended up starting is actually having a prom in a few weeks. So we end up actually kind of functioning as it's not quite Greek life, but it's kind of like diabetic Greek life. So yeah, basically we're like creating a bunch of opportunities for people to be able to get together and have a diabetes community. So at the moment, we actually have 160 active chapters, and we just ended up with 2 in Canada, which is really exciting. And essentially, a lot of the chapters have hangouts, they have events, they have initiatives. We have some chapters that are working on low stations right now. So we have lots of kind of like opportunities for grants where we can fund people's ideas for projects. So it's a really great way to get involved and then kind of move into your diabetes career as it makes sense for your community in college. And that's basically what we're doing over there in the chapter part of things. And then personally, I started a chapter a few years ago at my university, and that's actually how I got involved with the link. And through that, found out about a lot of opportunities as well, where I was able to, work together and like create projects where we could see actual tangible change on campus. So just, a few little things that we did in the just 2 years that I was part of the chapter. We were able to get scales, like measuring scales, because obviously we all use measuring scales every single time we eat food in the cafeteria, which was awesome. And then we were able to speak with some of the people in our like dining service, and we were helping them with carb counting because some of our food didn't have the most accurate labeling. So we were really able to like get involved in like the like diabetes management side of things. And then we were also able to get low stations put on campus. So kind of the way that at camp, if you get low, you can like run over to a table and get a juice box. We now have in our gym a box full of also emergency supplies. So it really is an awesome opportunity to be able to like find resources so that we can help people out on the ground with diabetes as well as having a community. And then last but not least, just kind of another cool opportunity that we have available kind of further into people's like upperclassmen years of college is the Next Gen Fellowship, which is kind of like the next level of like an intern and mentorship program where we link young adults with people in the diabetes community in medicine, advocacy, and other kind of community building events. So it really is like a great opportunity to get involved throughout the different stages of college. And for you guys as well, if you are interested or any of your kids are interested, you can actually start a chapter on our website if there isn't already one available at your school. So it's definitely something that you can easily get involved in as well.
Thank you, Becca. I think the most important thing for me as a parent or a caregiver is that our college chapters are student-led. We don't, we're not necessarily outreaching like all of the colleges and saying, hey, can you send some students our way to up our numbers? These active chapters that we have are all from students that want to create a club or a group or find some peer support for themselves. And so they have outreached us and we help them get it started. That's the whole point of our national organization. We help provide the support. We have some cool logo stuff. We talk to them about running events. But we are really here as an organization to help each individual chapter at each college across the country do whatever it is that feels most important and most needed by that group of young adults and students. For some of them, it's, as Becca talked about, it's a lot about advocacy. For some, it's just a chance to hang out and have coffee once a month and talk about the rough stuff about diabetes. For some, it is a chance to do, fun awareness things at school. So I just want to highlight that our college support, peer support program is really student-led, student-focused. Your young adult can get out of it whatever it is that they want. And starting a chapter and being a part of a chapter, we're here for them. That's the only thing I wanted to add to what you said, Becca. And yes, it's very easy to find a chapter on our website. It's very easy to start a chapter if you don't have one. And if any of you have young adults that might be interested in that or thinking about that, or you guys are looking at schools right now and you want to know if there's a chapter there, head over to our website. I'll drop it in the Slack and I'm going to share it as well. And reach out to us. And we'd be happy to chat with you and connect with you for sure. The only other thing that I wanted to talk specifically about is, and I'm going to change my decision of a screen share while I'm talking to you. So apologies for that. is our resource hub, because this is newer for us. College Diabetes Network has been around for a long time. I don't know if anyone has ever seen, either at your clinician's office or maybe somewhere else, one of these booklets, Off to College. Yeah, Kendra, I know, I figured you had a few of these, or maybe some other parents here. This is kind of how CDN got started with having resources for families like yours and like mine. Is we have this really fabulous, great, meaty 65-page booklet of all the things you need to know. And that's really helpful to have in a doctor's office, but that's not necessarily how your young adults are consuming information these days, right? Like we've got this comes home with you in a packet. Mom and dad might take a look at it. You might get them to take a look at it. So in our rebrand, as we became the Diabetes Link, we moved everything online. And this is what I'm going to screen share while we're talking briefly. This is our resource hub. So everything that was in, for those of you that are looking at the screen or want to, and I'll put a few links in as you guys are talking, everything that might be in a booklet like this, all of those like touchy topics like alcohol, like how do I talk to my roommates and my friends? How do I deal with my parents, and how do we deal with each other? What are our rules going to be around like when they can reach me or not? A lot of those kinds of questions and that kind of material is here on our hub. It's all sorted by topic. These are some of our older topics, newer topics. We've been in the process of updating them. Things like mental health and well-being, peer support, relationships. If you're newly diagnosed, all of our guides are on here as well. So all of these booklets are actually on here as a total, but this is the place to maybe either as yourself or for your young adult, and also clinicians. So we're sharing this with clinicians now to go and check out some of the stuff like, oh my goodness, how do we talk about this? How do we navigate this? This is our resource center for young adults first and for parents and caregivers second. A few other things that we do have in terms of support, and then we're probably going to stop talking so we can hear from some young adults here, and we're happy to pitch in, offer any color to any questions that may come up. For any of the parents, we have a Facebook group. So we have a support group for parents, and no kids allowed. But it's where parents can kind of talk about and say, I'm looking at this college, or I had this, or I had, mine had a low alarm in the middle of the night, or what do you do about this when your kid doesn't wake up, or how do you request accommodations? We've got that support group for families and caregivers, just like Becca talked about, that we have the chapters for students. We are online on Discord, so we have group peer support, like online chats for young adults as well. Honestly, we have a whole lot of stuff. We're here for young adults. We're especially here for the ones that are in college, because that's what we've been doing for a very long time. There's a lot of things that we could talk about that process, but I think you would rather hear from some young adults than us on it. We're happy to tap in and answer some questions. But that's just a really brief overview of who the Diabetes Link is and why we're here and what we're here for you guys. So thank you for giving us a little bit of your time tonight.
Thank you, Diane and Becca. And I feel like we have overabundance of rich resources on this call tonight, because I love that you shared your the resource hub, because I think parents who submitted some questions can see that you have content there that speaks directly to a lot of those questions. So hopefully we'll touch on a lot of them, but they should know that that's they don't have to catch it all here, that exists. And like I said before, we found that really helpful. It wasn't in the web, it wasn't in the same format as it is now, but it was really helpful for us to just understand about accessing, accommodations at school, how you go about that, and how to talk to roommates, how to come up with developing an agreement, which I'm not sure we would have thought of. So it really is very helpful information. So I'm sure we'll touch back on that a little bit too. But I would like to take a minute for Cobos, Goose, and Padfoot to kind of introduce themselves, and maybe you can each share a little bit about kind of your transition experience, and if you have anything any lesson learned or something that, this audience of parents and potential, prospective students that you would want, that either something you would have liked to have known or something that surprised you, whatever it may be. And I know I'm springing that on you in the last minute. So, but you're nimble people. So who would like to start? Go for it, Cobos.
Yeah, so my name is Cobos. I am in my senior year at the University of Portland. I'm almost junior now. So something that I kind of learned transitioning from high school to college, I kind of had like we got one of those little at the time CDN packets and whatnot, and I was reading through it with my parents beforehand. But when I got there, my parents kind of cold turkeyed me and were just like, we don't want to deal with the whole, like, what if there's a low in the middle of the night? Like, and we can't do anything. They didn't want to deal like with that stress. And they also didn't want to stress me out by like really getting on me about it from a 3-hour drive away. So I cold turkey there, and something that really like pushed me to do was, and that I realized pretty quickly, was to talk to everyone. Like, yeah, it's important to talk to your roommate about your diabetes and whatnot, but like I talked to, if I made a friend down the hall, I was like, oh yeah, I have type 1 diabetes. And I slid that in there somehow. And most everyone was like, oh my gosh, like, what does that mean and whatnot? And then like on campus events that happen for like freshmen, people were coming up to me like, how you doing and whatnot. So just really like being open about your diabetes and being ready to just share with people that you at least have it, so that there's always somebody almost everywhere on campus. It's like, oh, what's up to like Cobos? Whoa, what's up, Cobos? Like, how you doing today and whatnot, and can talk to you about it and know what's going on. So
that's a great tip. I love it. Goose, go for it.
Yeah, so hello, my name is Goose. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a sophomore at the University of Michigan studying public policy with a minor in biology on the pre-physician's assistant track, which is a very long mouthful. But yeah, so that's who I am. That's where I am. I am now in my second year, like I said, so I have a little bit of the experience under my belt, but obviously still a lot to learn. I would say one thing for parents to keep in mind, obviously college is a crazy transition and there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of moments where students or their children are wrestling with independence. I would say communicate early in terms of what the expectations are for like contacting regarding diabetes. Because, it's frustrating to feel smothered, but it can also feel a little isolating to kind of be, at least for me, it would feel a little isolating to like, have my parents go cold turkey on me. So I would say create those kind of like fixed, I guess, emergency boundaries, but then also let the student or your child come to you for support. Let them dictate how much support they want. I'm sure it's like anxiety, and I've never been a parent, obviously, but I'm sure it's anxiety inducing to like release them into the world. But let that kind of desire for communication and those expectations come from them, because they're the one dealing with it, they're the one living with it, and they know what will be best for them.
Thank you. Okay, Padfoot.
Hi, I'm Padfoot. I am at the university, not the university, sorry, I'm at Utah State University. I've kind of had a weird college experience. I went to community college and then I transferred here. So I'm in my 3rd year of college, but I'm graduating this semester. So that's exciting. Anyways, my biggest piece of advice or like lessons learned, I guess, from this whole experience is just the importance of, like Cobos was saying, I guess, the importance of your roommates knowing and your friends knowing. I've been blessed to have such great roommates who are really supportive of me and my diabetes and are always really asking lots of questions and really aware of everything. Like I have a T-Slim and it beeps, and a lot of them know which beep means what. They're like, oh, are you low or are you high, or like just very like they know what I need when I need it, even if I'm not fully able to help myself, if that makes sense. So I found lots of help knowing that I have people who support me, like a good community of support. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you, all of you, for your input and your those introductions. I feel like it might be useful to open it up right now to we have a lot of people on the call here, and we want to have this be sort of participant driven. So I want to open up for anyone who has questions. We have some we can kind of fall back on, and I know that both the young adults and the diabetes link we can step in, but I want to pause because there may be questions that you can help direct the conversation. So I'm opening it up.
Yeah, I have a
You can
question.
jump-
Can you hear me?
Yeah, please jump in.
So my daughter's 16. She's still in high school, but she doesn't get up for Lowe's ever. We always have to go help her, and then give her something to eat. So how do you transition with that, where you actually learn to wake up? I don't know. Maybe other people actually wake up, but she just doesn't. So.
My first question I have for that is, does she have a CGM?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Dexcom.
I used to, so with personal experience, sometimes I still don't wake up to it. But I do at some, that's kind of a hard one, at least for me, because sometimes like if I shared a room with a roommate last year, and if I wasn't waking up to my alarm, she would wake me up. So that's something like I made sure that the people I live with know about, like, hey, if you hear this beeping and I'm not doing anything if I'm not doing anything about it, like, please say something. That's something, one of the first things I tell the people I live with. But yeah, even now that I'm in my 20s, like I still don't wake up to it. But I think that's something that just as she gets older, maybe she'll get used to. I don't know how long she's had it, but also just making sure the people around her are aware. And that's at least my piece of advice with that.
I can butt into, so the good thing is that you mentioned she has a CGM. My brother also is a type 1 diabetic, and he also does not wake up to his lows. But there is a device, I'm sure there's a lot out there, but one that we use is called the Sugar Pixel. It's an alarm, and it's basically looks like an alarm clock, but it reads, you can connect it to your Dexcom or whatever CGM you use, and it will read your numbers, and you can set, you can program like the limits, the bounds, and then the alerts you want when, and you can even set like hour restrictions. So for example, I have it so that it only goes off when I'm like below, I believe 60 from like 10 p.m. to like 9 a.m. So if I'm below that range, I'm not joking, it makes such a loud noise. It is so incredibly annoying, but it works and it gets me up every time. And that's what my brother uses as well. And that's worked really well. So I would say look into technology like that. It's really simple, really easy to set up, but a really great resource.
So it's like a separate speaker or something, or a device that's
yeah.
in the room,
So
like an alarm clock?
I plug it in, and I put it right next to my bed on my little bedside table, which is also happens to be my mini fridge. But I put it there, and there's also an extension kind of cord thing that there's this like little tab that you can put under a pillow, and that will vibrate too. So it basically looks like an alarm clock with your Dexcom reading, and it's just chilling there. And then if you go low or you go high, depending on what it programs, it will like go off really loud. It will make an alarm. And so it's designed to wake you up.
Okay. Can you say the name of it again?
Yeah, sugar.
Yeah, Sugar Pixel.
Sugar Pixel. Okay, thank you.
And you connect it to the Wi-Fi network, so that then it connects with your Dexcom, which is how it reads it. And it is meant to be really obnoxious. Like our alarms rotate, so it's not like I think with the Dex or T-Slim pumps, you can kind of get used to that noise, so it ends up being in the background and they almost don't hear it. And this one, like it rotates through different sounds. It's pretty obnoxious. And Maeve's brother, or Goose's brother, excuse me, he has like slept through 5 firefighters in his bedroom with a fire truck outside. Like he's a very deep sleeper, and this gets him up. So, but I'll just add one thing as a parent, because this was I think this is probably most parents' primary concern, is what to do. Like, I'll speak for myself, Lowe's overnight, that our kids go to school 2/3 of the way across the country, and there's nothing that we could do physically for them in that scenario. And so it was important for us to kind of have a discussion or agreement with them. Like that's primarily where we want to provide backup for them. Is, they're really good at managing themselves. They can handle themselves 24/7, but I also want to give them, backup and some support, even though we're far, so they're not going it alone. So we did come up with, if they have a low and we give it, if they have a low at night when they're sleeping and we give it 15 minutes and we haven't heard from them, and then we've called them and we've texted them and haven't heard from them, then our next route is usually we use like Find My iPhone, because that's a different sound. It can break through. It's not a sound they hear often. It can break through kind of the other noise that they typically won't respond to. That typically works. But then our kind of last line of defense is that we'll call, and different schools handle this differently. Sometimes they handle it like within dorms, and some of it, like for us, it's a campus safety police. That's who we call when we can't get a hold of our kids and there is a prolonged low in the middle of the night. And we have used it, and they have thankfully been, they were fine in both scenarios. They were okay in both scenarios, but they also were understanding about why we did it, which I was grateful for too, because you feel like you're encroaching, you're sending security to their dorm at 3 a.m. or whatever. Yeah. But it also is, just if you can come to an agreement where like, what are the isolated scenarios where you would try to be that backup for them? Hopefully they feel some relief in that as well, and not just like helicoptering.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You just get a backup to them. So that's a campus security person would just knock on their dorm door then, is that to try and wake them up?
And I, like I said, I think different universities handle it differently. The ones where our kids go to school are actually really knowledgeable. I think type 1 is not an uncommon reason for them to be contacted. So like, for instance, when we called them, they said, do you know what their numbers are right now? They got it. So yeah, and it is different for different universities, sort of what that protocol is, but that's how it works at their school.
Okay.
I'm gonna echo just that this is probably that same from the parent perspective, because we all worry about it. It's probably one of the number one, that and accommodations are like the number one and two things talked about in our parent Facebook group all the time. Like, how do you deal with it? And so there are a ton of other suggestions in figuring out what works best for your, from the parent side. There's, Alexa dots, there's using the Find My iPhone feature to alert them, having roommates' phone numbers, like as a backup to call a roommate. All I wanted to add from our perspective is that there are a number of scenarios and situations. There are different ones that will work uniquely for each family. And from our perspective, your child is a young adult and a person first and has diabetes second. So if it's a worry about going to a school far away, like Kendra, I love that you said that your kids are 2/3 of the way across the country, or do we need to stay close from home or we need to go there? That of course is a personal decision for your student and your family about what everybody feels comfortable with. But with the way that technology is nowadays, don't let diabetes be the reason to hold them back from like looking at their dream school or, going big and reaching for something. Technology is incredible. And there are a lot of options and a lot of support.
I'd also like to add, I think a really helpful part of like the chapter network and having a club is that you always know that there's someone else on campus that also has like diabetes that you can talk to really quickly. And obviously like having close friends you can like text can be really helpful. But there have been some times where just like in our group chat, someone will be like, it's 3 a.m. and the vending machine isn't working. Can someone just bring me a juice? And like, I've run over to their dorm and just been like, I got you. Like, totally get it. I was a freshman once too, freaking out, calling my parents, sweating, like crying on the floor, somewhere on the first floor, waiting for a vending machine. Like, there are lots of contingency plans. And I think the more we can be surrounded with a community that like understands what's going on, the more we're able to feel a little bit more comfortable. Because when it comes down to it, like, there's never going to be a 100% certain fix for like every single low blood sugar. Like, we can't figure out every single possible solution beforehand, but the more kind of people you have that are around you that can help out, I think the better. And so again, like the community thing is huge. So definitely make sure your kids talk to people about their diabetes.
To add on even more to that, another resource that's really good to look into, somebody else's phone number you can have, is that if you're living in like a traditional dorm, or even I live in like on-campus apartments, we have a hall director, an assistant hall director, and I have 4 different RAs. Technically, only one of them is in charge of me, but my parents have contacts for all 6 of those people. And they have come and knock on my door before when I haven't woken up from a low and somebody has found out, like a family member has found out, and they've come and knock on the door and my roommates have opened it and then they're like, hey, is he asleep right now? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, well, you need to go wake him up right now. So that's also a really good person to have in your back pocket.
Another, I guess, like housing situation too. I currently live off campus, so I guess we're like touching all the places right now. But like with off campus housing, like contact suggestions, I would definitely recommend like roommates, especially like the roommates that are close to whoever your child is also. But yeah, my perspective.
Other questions from other parents? Yeah, go ahead, Leanne.
Well, one of the young folks just said, talk about this with other people. How do you encourage your young person who is actually very private about their diabetes to do that in college? Because we have a 17-year-old junior who prides herself on being super competent and managing her diabetes well and does not ask her friends for help. So how do you help your young person understand how important it is to rely on other people and that it's okay to be vulnerable? This is probably not a question that has easy answers to it. But this is something that weighs heavy on our minds.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one thing about the blessing of diabetes is that it makes you very responsible and receptive to yourself and your own body, and yeah, just really independent. But that's also can make it a barrier in terms of getting help and being okay with getting help. So I know that's a really difficult kind of line to toe. And I know it varies between person to person. I know that, like, I'm sure you're very supportive of her and all that she does. And I know that it can be just a matter of personal preference and personality. I would say the thing to stress is that college is a different environment. You don't have your family around you. There's a lot of new people, and you have to, just like everybody else, it's not just a diabetes thing, but you have to take the steps to, get to know people and put the support systems in place to help you succeed, and as safety measures. If it really comes down to that, like, it's a safety measure. You just have to have those guidelines in place. And that doesn't mean that you have to use them all the time. It doesn't mean that you're going to use them all the time, but it's just important. It's vital for your own safety to have them there. And I would say, also, it's a time of transition and everything. So outside of diabetes, there's going to be moments where you're going to need to ask for help and things like that. So trying to normalize that transition and how everything is a little bit of oh my God, what am I doing? That's okay. That's I would, I guess, encourage the feeling of dependency and asking for help to not just be related to diabetes, because I think that then normalizes that sensation.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
I can agree a lot with with Goose. Am I low? No, anyways. But to go with that also, I think I relate a lot to how you've described your daughter's feeling. And I think for me, the way of asking for help isn't necessarily asking for help, but making sure that people are aware. And I feel that's the biggest thing too, is that just making sure that the people you surround yourself are aware of your situation. And I feel it's also easy for them to pick up on, personally, I have a CGM and I have a pump, and you can see both of those things. And so there's obviously people are going to ask about it. And one thing I've learned is that people aren't afraid to ask about it. And I've learned not to be afraid to share about it too. And also, if you live with people, you're going to be doing normal diabetes stuff like site changes, or getting your insulin out of the fridge, or treating a lotion like that. You're going to be dealing with diabetes in front of a lot of people. Not necessarily in front of a lot of people, but in front of people. And then they're going to become aware of your situation just by living with them. And so something that's just helped me without realizing it's helped me is that just not being afraid to do diabetes things in front of those I surround myself with, because it's helped them learn about my situation also.
Yeah, just to jump in on that, I agree wholly with everything Goose and Padfoot have said. I too, I'm somebody who I just went about 2 hours ago to my very first ever college diabetes network, or not CDN, Diabetes Link meeting at University of Portland. And I sat in that room for over an hour with people. It took me like 45 minutes to go, by the way, my name is, and I've had diabetes for this long and stuff. So I'm still really shy about it. But like they both said, I think that college has a way of bringing out that like ability in your child to, it definitely did for me at least, to bring out my ability to just like Padfoot said, eventually somebody's going to go to dinner with me and I'm going to pull out my pump and they're going to be like, whoa, dude, what's that? You know, or just to eventually realize that it's like the necessity that people just have to be told. But from like my parents' perspective, when we first arrived, they went right up to the RA and we're like, okay, Cobos, like, go ahead and tell your RA, like what's going on? What's the deal here? And they were super receptive to that. And like the people who want to be RAs, the people who are in those leadership positions, even if they're peers of your student, want to like foster that relationship with on campus and everything. So it's also like, I know this isn't the most reassuring thing to hear as a parent, but it's also a lot of trust that your like the college is going to bring out and that your child will come out of that shell.
I want to add, if I can, from that parent perspective, I'm actually going to share this. Just if anyone wants to like take a picture of it, take a screenshot of it. This is a part of some of our resources. One of the things that we suggest is, to your point, Leanne, talk about it in advance, which obviously you're already doing and thinking about it because you're on these calls and your kids are in, cool programs. What we really advocate for on advocating for the young adults is the second one, that parents let your young adult be the one to share the story of their diabetes, because it's their lived experience, and how and who they want to tell is ultimately up to them. But you can certainly, one of the things that we have found to help structure this is a communication agreement. And this is just a couple of suggestions. It's, again, individual to every family, but for parents to kind of say, I'm not going to harass you about your blood sugar. I'm going to let you decide who you want to tell. I'm going to send you care packages. I'm going to help you. I'm not going to overreact. But on your side, I have a few, expectations of, your own care for yourself. Wear that ID bracelet. We're going to make sure you're part of the agreement to uphold is that you find support on your campus, that you always take low supplies with you, that you've registered with, accommodations or disability services. For us, that's a great way of structuring it. It's kind of like, with the Dexcom follow, like, a lot of us, as you kind of navigate and your kid starts taking care of their own stuff as they get into the high school age, you've got to back off a little bit and say, okay, I'm only going to bother you if it's above this. This is just like that extrapolated to the next level. But we found some kind of like conversations, communication agreements. Some of these points are really helpful in starting the conversation that works for you and your family and your young adult.
And if I could add one thing, I know this is going a little bit beyond your question, but I think it's definitely been something that I've struggled with while coming here, is that, like Cobos mentioned, and like Padfoot mentioned, there are a lot of people who don't know about diabetes or think they know about diabetes, but actually don't. And that can sometimes be a little bit draining and can wear on you when there's a lot of questions being asked or a lot of kind of misunderstandings being expressed towards you that you feel that you have to justify yourself, and that can be degrading sometimes. But what I've learned, and I know you mentioned that your daughter is very confident in that, so I am very proud of her for that. But what I've learned is that the more you normalize, or like your student, your child normalizes having diabetes and living with diabetes, and that explaining it in a way where it's like, yeah, this is a part of me. It's really important to my survival, to my functioning, but it doesn't define me. And here are all the cool things I can do despite it. The more you normalize it and present it in that way, the more people are like, okay, chill. That's awesome. Like the more they don't care, the more they don't care, but the more they don't find it to be like an issue. So I think like presenting it and having that confidence when delivering information about your own care is also really can go a long way.
Thanks. Other parent questions? We have about 10 minutes left, so I think we have some time for more conversation. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi there. I have a 17-year-old high school boy, and he's going to be going off to college after next year. But I was just curious, how do you handle supplies? Did you, when you went to college, did your parents take you to a pharmacy and hook you up, with the schedule there, or do you get them via mail? I'm just curious, how does that work?
So I've had a lot of different like ways I've gotten my supplies, I feel like, since I've been here. So I've been in Utah for, this is my second year. So when I was at the community college, I was just at home. So I kept everything the same. But when I moved here, I got my prescriptions through Walgreens, and all I had to do for that was just change my location. And then they just transferred it to this Walgreens. And so there was a couple times where like I would pick up my prescription, they'd be like, are you sure it's from this, or something like that. Or there'd be times where for some reason a prescription went to one in Gresham, Oregon, where I grew up. And then I had to just like go to the Walgreens in my school town and be like, hey, this was sent to this Walgreens, but I actually need it here. And then they were easily able to just transfer it over to that pharmacy and pick it up, which was really easy. Now I get all of my prescriptions online, actually. And I still like go through the same insurance as I did at home. And so everything is from like Providence Home Medical equipment or something like that. So with them, I just changed my address to my school address. And I've had a couple different addresses since being here. So I just make sure that I use the most recent up-to-date address. And it's easily just a change of address, at least for me.
Just like Padfoot, I also use Walgreens, and like she said, it's so easy. You just I use the app. So I just went in the app and was like, changed my home store, and then was like, send it to here. And so I can get on whenever I need it. It's a lot of personal responsibility because I have to watch my insulin. But when I get down to one vial, I hit order, and within a week, they're like, oh, it'll be here for 9 days. Come pick it up. And that's really easy because then I've been able to get on the app. And if I'm at home for summer or for a break, and I just so happen to need my insulin in the middle of break, I can literally just change my home store, hit the button, and then 2 days later, I get an email and it opens this Walgreens in Corvallis now, or down in Roseburg, wherever I'm staying. So
My method of delivery is a little bit different. I usually, at the beginning of summer, my parents and I go through okay, how many supplies will I need for about 3 months? And so we go through that, and then we put together a huge package. Basically, one of my entire suitcases that comes with me to college is just diabetes stuff. And so I bring it with me, probably a little bit extra just to account in case there's any kind of issues. And then when I see them in usually over Thanksgiving, then they'll bring me more supplies. And then when I go home, I bring more supplies back. So I kind of restock throughout the year in bigger quantities. We also have the luxury of doing that because like I mentioned, both of my brothers and myself are all type 1 diabetics. So we can kind of manipulate it a little bit in terms of having that extra supply. But I understand if you're the only one with diabetes, that's not always possible. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways of getting supplies in college. And I'd say talk to your healthcare provider, and also just figure out what feels best and easiest for you.
I'm going to add 2 comments. One being, you can definitely have things shipped straight to school if need be, if you're on mail order. Also check, depending on your school, check with your health center, because sometimes that's the worst kind of situation. We've heard that from a lot of students that, vary over the years, that your insulin gets shipped in, your stuff gets shipped in, the mail room closes at 5 p.m. or 3 p.m. on a Friday, and then you can't get access to your stuff until Monday. If you ship it to the health center, the medical, not every college, but it's worth asking. Some will accept shipments of that kind of stuff directly for your student and let them know and hold it for them. So they have a little bit more regular access to it. It's worth asking about. The other obvious to us, but not obvious in the moment, maybe when you're packing and going back and forth, is make sure you've got stuff at home and at school, because it has happened so much. We've heard lots of stories of you take everything to school because you don't want to run out. You don't want to go low on some supplies. You're cutting it close, and then you come back home for Christmas break or for that week at Thanksgiving, and oh shoot, I don't have, we don't have any supplies left here. So always make sure you keep a good solid stash at home too. Those are just 2 kind of tips and tricks that we've heard a lot of.
I'll just add one more thing, and then I know Jeff, I see Jeff, you have a question, but I was just going to say the other thing is, despite our kids being in school in Michigan and we're in Oregon, we happen to have a family friend that lives there. And so if you end up with any of your network near where your kids are, if they're not near where you are, she keeps some backup insulin and sites at her. It's like for emergency case, if like, just so there's one more sort of line of defense should they need it. So if that's a possibility, obviously you may know no one, and that doesn't happen, but that has been helpful. But Jeff, it sounds like you wanted to say something.
Just want to ask a couple of questions if other people don't have questions. So college is a lot more stressful than high school. And so how have the students that have been talking, how have you dealt with stress? And then also, have you trained roommates, RAs, professors, fellow students on how to use glucagon?
I'll kick this one off because I'm in the middle of sending in what's called EdTPA, which is like for teaching. That's what I'm going to school for. And it's like all this stuff I have to write out for the Oregon standards and everything. And that's been super stressful. So currently how I've been handling that stress, like in regards to my diabetes, is even though I have a CGM, I've been testing sometimes when I really don't feel right. My CGM has been spot on ever since I've got it, but just that extra protection. And then being a senior, this is really easy for me. It might not be so easy your freshman year, but just being able to talk to people about it, that also helps my diabetes, because just releasing that pressure in any way you can will help the diabetes aspect of it all. And on the topic of your second question there, training RAs and stuff, I've kind of trained some of my roommates. I've been like, if I seem really stressed out, please just talk to me, because it does help my diabetes and whatnot. And that's been like not glucagon training, but that sort of training I've gone through. And then on regards to glucagon training, I've trained all of my RAs and our like on campus security service have also been trained. So
yeah, I would say that like just like living beforehand, I mean, like college is more stressful, I will admit, and you have less of that kind of support around you. But I'd say like it's more stressful, but it's also like you've been, I don't know, like your student is in high school right now, and that can be stressful too. And so it's like, it's nothing that we haven't encountered before. So I would like use that kind of frame of mind to give you like a little bit of a breath of air to calm down about it a little bit. But I will say that like one thing that sometimes when I'm feeling burnt out or really stressed out, it can be like really frustrating to then have this additional layer of like, oh, I have to be my body's organ all the time. And oh, I have a really high blood sugar right now and I feel like crap. Or like, oh, I have a low blood sugar and I'm like about to I'm walking across campus because I'm going to be late to class. Like there is that additional layer that can make it harder. But I would say in those moments, like what I've learned is that like taking care of your well-being is so much more important than everything else. And you won't be able to function. You won't be able to like write essays as clearly, feel your best, go participate in like a sports practice if you're not maintaining like proper care of yourself. And obviously there are fluctuations and everything, but in those moments, taking a breath to really like get the energy to invest in yourself to then feel better later is like really important. So I would say that like your health comes first, everything else is secondary, and it can be difficult, but also it's nothing that you haven't encountered before.
In regards to stress, I say just learn how your body really reacts to stress in like a blood sugar sense. Like we all react differently to it, and that's something that I've been learning more about recently, is just trying to figure out like how I react to different things, especially stress. And then like Cobos was saying, like even like talk to people around you. One of my roommates is hypoglycemic, which isn't the same, but we can relate on a lot of things. And so sometimes it's really helpful to talk to her because she'll ask lots of questions because she's still learning about her own medical needs that way too. And so just being able to just rant to people honestly is like one of my best ways of dealing with like diabetes stress. And then just taking care of yourself, like Goose was saying. And then with glucagons, I was actually going to mention this earlier, but I'm glad we waited because it relates so much more now. When I first moved into where I live now, we have a whiteboard on our just like in our entryway, and we each have a square with like our name and our contact numbers. Our roommates can like contact us if we need. So immediately when I moved in, I put my name, my number, and I put type 1 diabetic, and wrote like my glucagon, like my emergency shot is located. And I wrote like exactly where it was. I said in my room, hanging on my hook in the little blue bag kind of thing. And it's just the bag I take with me everywhere. And I was like, if it's not there, there's one on my shelf. And I said, like, I can see it right now, second shelf up, like above my desk kind of thing. And then I saw some roommates had noticed it was there, and I had mentioned it to some of the ones that I was the closest with at the time. And they asked about it. I was like, can I see where it is? And I like showed them exactly where it was and showed what it looked like and told them what to do. And the one I have is similar to an EpiPen. It's like the click one kind of thing. But I also have one of the like the red case ones where you have to like shoot it in and pull it out. Anyways, but yeah, so for me, I just was very upfront and clear about where it was and what's for and what to do about it. And again, I've been really grateful to have roommates who ask a ton of questions and want to know like every way they can to support me. And I think that's something I've learned a lot through college, is that people are much more just like open and like willing to support and just really curious, rather than in high school. Like in college, I don't know, I feel like people are much more curious about it, I guess, than before. And so they're much more open to being like, yeah, I want to know all the things, I want to help you kind of thing. Yeah.
And even if you run into someone who is like not like that, like, you know, put your foot down, like be like, this is a medical like thing, this in case of emergency, you need to know how to do this because it will save my life. So like putting that emphasis on it, if they really are not interested in it, can help. But I've never run into any issues like that. Like Padfoot said, people have been super curious. They've like asked a ton of questions. I inspired one girl to give a presentation about diabetes to her Spanish class, another ran to write an essay about healthcare policy in their class, like out of like conversations from dinner. Like it can be really inspiring to people, and people are really receptive to it. So I would say like keep that open mentality too, that the world is not like everyone trying to like drag you down and all this like depressing stuff. Like people are really awesome. So, and also in terms of dealing with stress, I know I'm going on again, but tap into your camp community. Like I will talk to Padfoot, I'll like, you know, FaceTime my other counselor friends and other friends from camp. And that's a really awesome resource whenever I'm feeling like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. This is feeling like I'm hitting a wall with my numbers and blah, blah, blah. Talk to someone who gets it. And it doesn't even have to be diabetes related. It can just be about life, but like tap into that community. It's a great resource.
Going off what Goose said, like 2 seconds, Cobos, 2 seconds. That's it. Literally 2 weeks ago, I was sitting on the floor at my kitchen at home. Actually, my blood sugar was probably like 40 or something like that. And Goose just happened to message me while she was waiting in the airport. And I was like, Goose, this is how I'm feeling right now. And I sent a picture of myself like eating the cupboard kind of thing, because my blood sugar was so low. And I was like, I feel so bad. I'm like, am I gonna pass out? I don't know. But I was so glad that she was able to be there to support me at that time, even though she was like out of the country actually. But yeah, so lean on your community as much as you can.
Definitely agree with everything they're saying. One thing that I would add that Padfoot kind of touched on is, I know we all think of glucagon and we think of like the red case with like the big needle and like having to mix it and everything, but definitely explore those other options. Like Padfoot mentioned, the EpiPen type one. I have one called Basquini, Basqimi. Yeah. And it's a nasal injection, which like so many people that I've talked to about it, like Goose said, I've stuck so many conversations, like people know how to do it now just because they actually are genuinely interested, but they're still like, it's a needle. I'm not a doctor. I can't do that. But the nasal injection one is like, I show them and I'm like, yeah, look, it says it goes click and then click again and shoots in your nose. And like, well, anyone can do that. So that definitely also can like relieve stress and get people on board way more quickly. So definitely talk to your doctor.
On the note of like talk to your doctor, that's the first thing I did when like at my appointment when I was going to go to like when I was going to move over here. That's the first thing I talked about my doctor right before I moved to Utah. So I was like, hey, I'm going to be living with people. I know people are scared of needles. Can I use any other type of glucagon than what I have right now? Because I had the red case one, and I knew that there's so many people our age who are scared of needles or wouldn't know how to do it, or they'd freak out in the situation kind of thing. So I asked about like the nasal one and then the click one I have, right now. So yes, definitely look into other ones, but I say too.
Okay, that is our time. It is 8:05. However, our guest would we'll stick around for a few final questions if you have any final things to ask them, but at this moment, we'll let everybody go and say thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all of our guests. That was one of the greatest conversations. And I can tell that we probably need to do 2 of these. Like we didn't quite get to a lot of the important things that were that had come up. So definitely check in with the diabetes link. That page is awesome. I was kind of looking at it. So many great resources in there. But we'll do this again, maybe next year, maybe in the fall. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, thanks everybody. Thank you, Kendra, for being our amazing host. And
Yes, this was a what a
Diane and
room
Becca.
full of insight. Thank you, everybody.